This time on Deep Double Analysis, I'm going to be dissecting presidential nominee Joe Biden's plan for America, while also showing how his plan for America is the direct result of many years of planning by global elites, namely anti-national, anti-Western political leaders and multinational corporations who profit from such policies. Joe Biden, or more likely his handlers, recently released a series of lengthy policies and promises that are referred to as Biden's plan. Today I'm going to go through the main chunk of this plan, which is about all things immigration, and point out exactly how and why what this man wants is egregiously awful and in all ways anti-American and anti-Western. Then, I will show how his plan is not just a product of one man's campaign for president, but a product of many years of careful planning and cooperation of globalist politicians and multinational agencies. So focus up, bucko. Here we go. Right out of the gate, the plan assaults the reader with emotional propaganda and a strong anti-white message. Emotional messaging is par for the course with politicians, but the introduction doesn't even outline anything. It simply suggests it's the white man's burden to feed and house the rest of the world, while also villain signaling to other anti-whites who believe the orange man is in fact bad. Next, before getting into any particulars, the Biden plan openly bears how anti-white it is. The plan calls the mere existence of the United States an original sin. Between the lines, this is saying that being white in America is ineffably damned because all of us white Americans who exist here today are because of the unforgivable original sin of colonization, conquest, and slavery. If you are only looking for proof that the Biden plan is abjectly and unashamedly anti-American and anti-white, then here it is. You can stop watching this video right now because it's only going to get worse. The opening goes on to say that immigration is who we are as a nation, that immigration is a core value to our nation, that immigration is a vital part of the aspiration of America having a future. This is both a lie and a subtle manipulation at the same time. The lie is that immigration could possibly be what a nation is, what our nation is. The Europeans who came to America didn't immigrate here. Immigration would require there to already be a functional society that we could immigrate into and become a part of. No. Europeans who formed this country, the United States, they were explorers, adventurers, and visionary builders. Our ancestors conquered both the wilds and the sparse native tribes who lived here, often peacefully, mind you, and forged new cities, built new roads, and constructed an entirely new civilization where there was none. The manipulation is that all countries, all nations, are the same, and that people are all the same. That people the world over are just masses of like-minded persons who can be interchangeably added or taken away from any country, and then used to bolster our numbers and make a stronger country or economy. The only choice, the best choice, is just add more people from anywhere. As the plan starts to take form, it's quite clear the focus is going to be on, and I know you're going to be surprised by this, how the orange man is bad, and that everything the orange man wants is in fact bad. Bad for you, bad for the voter, and that Trump clearly doesn't care about who really matters in our country. Immigrants. Not even able to go a single sentence without moving the focus back to immigration, the plan claims that our spirit of innovation and entrepreneurship is directly related to immigrants, and that trillions of dollars of our economy come from immigrants. This is a lie that many globalists use as part of their magic show for the masses to talk about how immigration is good for the economy and all this other bollocks. So, of course, the Biden plan promises to bolster immigration and to keep a steady flow of working-age, red, able-bodied young men, immigrants, constantly flowing into our country from elsewhere. Next up is such a blatant lie that I have to stop and unpack it. Quote, the Trump created a humanitarian crisis at the border, end quote. What a load of absolute globalist trash. Peak Trump derangement syndrome. First of all, the real crisis about America's southern border is that hundreds of thousands of illegal aliens pour into our country every year, and crisis-level amounts of violence, rape, murder, child trafficking, sex trafficking, and organized crime occurs in Mexico and all throughout Central and South America, specifically connected to our border problem. So not only is this humanitarian crisis not Trump's fault, it's not even really completely America's fault. Furthermore, President Obama's administration is directly responsible for the budget cuts, executive orders, and policy changes that directly led to border control and illegal alien enforcement being in the sorry state it is now. So, even though it's not completely fair to put the blame or the onus on any single American, if a single president is to blame for this so-called crisis, it's Obama, not Trump. But I digress. Next is where we start getting into some particulars on the Biden plan. And of course, topping the list is modernizing our immigration systems and tackling the root cause of irregular migration. Well, what the hell is that stuff, you ask? Well, I'm not a globalist either, so I had to look up what these terms mean. And I was led on quite the journey, but we'll dig into that more later on. So, of course, the first step in any policy plan is to blame the orange man and systemic racism. From this point on, the entire plan is not only anti-Trump and points to Trump as the single cause of America's problems, but it never comes off its anti-white, anti-American message. The plan claims that Trump's administration, and by fiat, those who support him or vote for him, is based on draconian policies which are grounded in, you guessed it, racism. It's important to remember going forward that the words racist and racism are anti-white words. These terms have always meant white people are bad, white people are the oppressors. And they are used this way all the time. Whenever you see these words in modern political discourse, especially from the media, they are always a psychological capsule to deliver an otherwise unpalatable idea or anti-white sentiment to a mostly white populace. Keep that in mind moving forward. Like we don't already know, the Biden plan reminds us again how important and valuable immigrants are, and that ceasing racism is the only way to restore America's morality. I find this personally detestable, I find it infuriating, but if I stopped to pontificate every time the phrasing of a bullet point in this plan outraged me, this video would end up being 3 hours long. So I'll do my best to contain my ire so we can get through this. Anything that stands in the way of mass migration and the rights of immigrants to steal from taxpayers is, of course, on the chopping block. The Biden plan villain signals about the children in cages and the children being separated from their parents' media lies, and then goes on to say they will end corrupt systems or practices that don't even exist. Namely, how the asylum system fuels violence at the border. This is another complete and total lie the media has created in the last few years of the orange man bad media circus. Are you seeing a pattern yet with the Biden plan? I'm going to start skipping certain segments of this plan, or we'd never get through it all. But I am going to highlight some things that you need to know about, that you need to hear. Especially key points, phrasing, and messaging of this plan that you'll need to have in your head for what we talk about next, about the Biden plan being obviously just one more step of both the un-American and anti-American globalist project. In this part of the plan, it talks about how to better improve the conditions of asylum seekers and immigrants of all kinds who don't go through official channels, the ones who simply show up at our door and demand a better life. They want to foster better public-private initiatives via legal nonprofits, dramatically increase U.S. government resources to support migrants of all kinds, invest in a case management program to manage all of these new immigrants, nonprofit case management programs which directly supports the migrants that navigate legal obligations, which means subsidizing through nonprofits, i.e. globalist money, entire teams of people that you don't vote for to help them navigate or cheat our legal system to gain benefits and citizenship. And this is, of course, to enable migrants to live in dignity and safety while awaiting their court hearings, facilitating things like doctor visits, social services, and even school enrollment for their children. And this is talking about asylum seekers and immigrants, either illegal or legal, who simply show up at our door and demand entrance. This isn't even talking about migrants who are legally here. They want to give them all that stuff too. We're going to skip down now to something that is so egregious it would probably make many Democrat voters' blood boil if they knew about it. Reverse Trump's public charge rule. This rule runs counter to our values as Americans and the history of our nation. allowing immigration officials to make an individual's ability to receive a visa or gain permanent residency contingent on their use of government services, such as SNAP benefits or Medicaid, their household income, and other discriminatory criteria. That's correct. You are not hallucinating. You're not dreaming. I didn't make this up. The Biden plan claims that we, as Americans, have a moral, ethical imperative to allow people that we don't vote for to divert our tax money to provide food, housing, and health care to all immigrants, including asylum seekers, illegal aliens, and their families. Not only that we should, but we should do it with a smile. Okay, sorry about that. I get heated. I'll edit that out. Ah, yes. DACA. Y'all remember that? The Dreamer Act of Obama? Of course, those of us with any sense and compassion for fellow taxpayers hate DACA. The Biden plan calls the termination of DACA cruel and counterproductive. Well, yeah, if your highest moral value is giving handouts to people who don't belong here and don't contribute socially or financially to our society. Obviously, the Biden plan will not only reenact DACA, but will ensure even more federal aid to so-called dreamers, including boosted loans and Pell Grant options for university attendance, and create special programs to help them replace American children in schools and in the workplace, even if the dreamers don't speak English. That's right, the Biden plan promises to use our tax money to create special services to help children of immigrants gain priority in schools and not even have to learn to speak our language first. Boy, nothing sounds more ethical than that, huh? This part is worth noting because it's not something most people know about. I didn't know about it. It's the system called Temporary Protected Status, which is the asylum seeker tag that allows a person to maintain a state of status limbo, where they are allowed in the country but only with certain privileges and only with certain freedoms until their case is investigated. So again, obviously, this must immediately be changed and expanded to never allow anyone in the world a denial of rights or freedoms and, of course, direct access to our tax money, our societal systems, and our economy. Below this part, the Biden plan speaks directly about how we should be sympathetic to illegal aliens and stop persecuting those who behave well. Here it says, targeting people who have never been convicted of a serious criminal offense. President Biden will end workplace raids, will not interfere with their ability to organize and improve their wages, and no one should be afraid to seek medical attention, to go to school, to go to their job or their place of worship because of fear of immigration enforcement. So not only does the Biden plan want to directly subsidize illegal immigrant workers by offering them full citizenship rights to healthcare options, labor union options, tax benefits, but the plan seeks to force all immigrant control agents, namely the BPD and ICE, to undergo mandatory training programs to make them more compliant with the plan's goals. Next, the plan goes over naturalization and how the process has too many restrictions and barriers, that we need to, and I quote, restore and defend the naturalization process for green card holders by removing roadblocks to naturalization and obtaining the right to vote. Ah yes, of course, because that's what really matters here, isn't it? Making sure everyone who comes here knows who butters their bread. They need the opportunity to pay mama government what really matters, which is that sweet, sweet democratic socialist vote, baby. Now we start getting into the more insidious parts of the Biden plan, which again, I urge you to remember for the next part of the video. The Biden plan wants to create a new task force, specifically to prioritize immigrant small businesses and communities over the small businesses and communities of those of us who already live here. The lie here is that this is healthy for the naturalization process, but that is not the truth. This is part of the primary goal of the New World Order, which we'll get to next, which is to destabilize small businesses and force everyone to be reliant on the monopo state, which is what I call the unholy union of governments and multinational corporations. These prioritized businesses won't be your mom and pop hardware store, your floral shops ran by grandma. No. These are going to be branches of larger, globally funded umbrella corps of the private sector. Units like Uber drivers are going to replace the host population's small business. The main difference here being that the immigrant replacers will be beholden to no one locally. They'll barely even be beholden to whatever immigrant community that they become part of when they get here. They're only going to truly be beholden to whatever the globalist umbrella corp is that employs them and to whatever party gives them their welfare benefits. In America, it will be the DNC, which is of course just another face of the soulless globalist Soviet superstate like the EU. Now we get to something that I guarantee the media will never cover, and something that not even Republicans will go after, since many of them are involved in globalist practices as well. Here, the Biden plan starts talking about the real goal of all of this. The plan calls the barriers of immigration a regional problem, and that leaders of the world must come together in order to remove these barriers. The Biden plan says the President of the United States will host a meeting of regional leaders from all major countries in Central America and devise a national plan to modernize immigration. There's that term again. Modernizing immigration. In the Biden plan, under modernizing immigration, it says this: Biden will commit significant political capital to finally deliver legislative immigration reform to ensure the U.S. remains open and welcoming to people from every part of the world. 11 million undocumented immigrants, illegal aliens, already here, already a part, and they want more. They want to naturalize these, and they want more. The directive of our immigration system will be to reunite families and enhance diversity. And the next couple of paragraphs after this talk about the diversity element. Now, the first part of that's already pretty scary. Welcoming people from every part of the world and keeping the U.S. open, making sure it remains open. But then, here's the insidious part. It's the diversity part. They're wanting to make this all under the banner of diversity. And where has diversity gotten us? Look at Black Lives Matter. 43 cities being affected by riots this year. How many hundreds of violent rapes and beatings, dozens of murders already that the news won't talk about, businesses being destroyed, billions of dollars of damages. And if you say anything cross about anything involving the protesters or Black Lives Matter, well, what are you called? They call you a racist. They call you a white supremacist. And they beat you with the diversity stick. And now what are they trying to do? They're putting all of this mass migration, globalization under the banner of diversity. Now, what do they call us again when we speak negatively about anything under the diversity tag? That's right, racist. A primary part of modernizing immigration is putting it under the diversity tag, and therefore white people, and only white people, will be the evil ones, will be the oppressors for speaking out against these policies and wanting to halt mass migration. This is one of the most blatant Soviet-style head game, word game tactics I've ever seen, and it's not in a video game, it's not in a movie, it's the policy of someone running for the President of the United States of America. We now move to the second half of this installment of Deep Double Analysis, wherein I show you why the Biden plan is just another face of Soviet-style globalism, or the New World Order, as the globalist mouthpieces like to call it.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order, a world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations. When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order, an order in which a credible United Nations can use its peacekeeping role to fulfill the promise and vision of the UN's founders.
It is a big idea, a new world order, a world in which there is the very real prospect of a new world order.
After 1989, President Bush said, and it's a phrase that I often use myself, that we needed a new world order.
There is a chance for the President of the United States to use this disaster to carry out what his father, a phrase his father used, I think, only once, and hasn't been used since, and that is a new world order.
So that the problem of the Bush presidency will be the emergence of a new international order
Within the next 4 years, we will see the emergence of a new international order.
The beginning of a new international order.
The pieces are in flux. Soon they will settle again. Before they do, let us reorder this world around us.
I think his task will be to develop an overall strategy for America in this period when really a new world order can be created. It's a great opportunity. It isn't just a crisis.
It's about the future of Europe and a new world order.
There's a need for a new world order, but it has different characteristics in different parts of the world.
But today, with Asia already outproducing Europe, India and China are clearly becoming part of our new order.
We are now facing a common challenge. And the challenge is how to build a world order for the first time in history on a global basis.
So, in conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, a new world is emerging. It is a new world order with significantly different and radically new challenges.
The affirmative task we have now is to actually create a new world order.
Good evening, everybody. President Obama and British Prime Minister Gordon today calling for a new world order to tackle our global economic crisis.
Here, we see the Global Compact for Migration, a treatise on safe, orderly, and regular migration on a global scale. In other words, mass migration. Note the date, September 2016. It says that heads of state came together under the United Nations banner to discuss global migration and develop an international agenda specifically to facilitate mass migration. 193 UN member states, that's countries by the way, had their UN representatives sign a declaration to aid refugees and migrants around the world and to adapt to Western countries. This isn't a secret. In fact, it's something many globalist politicians and their mouthpieces openly celebrate. But here, let's take a closer look. The meeting was in New York, and this treatise was called the Declaration for Refugees and Migrants. The goal of this assembly and treatise was to address mass migration and promise to enact the following for all 103 UN represented member states. So as I go through this, I want you to remember that 193 countries on planet Earth have UN representatives who agreed to this. The primary aim of this treatise is to facilitate the movement and assimilation of migrants who must, or choose to, flee their home areas due to conflict and natural disasters, and the declaration specifically names climate change. First, I'd like to remind the viewer how in the last few years the mainstream media, schools, universities, many politicians have been publicly shaming anyone who questions the sky is falling narrative around global climate change. And all major social media platforms heavily censor or even completely deplatform those who question or criticize this narrative. Next, I'd like to show the viewer the emotional, ethical focus of this declaration. Here we see the treatise forces participants to agree with the globalist dogma that immigration is not only inevitable, but an economic and social good for all Western countries as laid out by the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Well, what the f*** is that, you might ask? Well, we've come this far, let's keep going down the rabbit hole. I'm sure this won't end in tears. Here's another UN-supported globalist plan laid out in 2015, just the year before, entitled Transforming Our World, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. And yes, it's just as nightmarish and Orwellian as you might have guessed. It starts off with buckets of typical hollow emotional trib, tossing around phrases like, we're all one race, poverty is tyranny, no one left behind, typical globalist bollocks. The agenda claims it will realize human rights on a global scale and achieve gender equality and the empowerment of all women and girls. You can almost see the hammer and sickle flying behind me while I read this, can't you? It outlines the following as critically important to all humanity and the well-being of the planet: to ensure dignity of all peoples so they can fulfill their human potential, to take urgent and immediate action on climate change, there it is, and to ensure all human beings can live economic, social, and technological adequate lives in harmony. I'm pausing here for a moment because I know many of my viewers just puked, and I would like you to get settled and cleaned up before we continue. This agenda demands immediate mobilization and a new global partnership wherein all member states move towards global solidarity in order to uplift the poorest and most vulnerable of all countries and all peoples, of course, with the goal of transforming the world for the better. Keep in mind, this disgusting Orwellian nightmare is exactly what the Declaration in New York is based on. This is what the treatise is talking about, and the UN representatives present there were totally aware of this, since most of the same ones were present and supported this agenda the year before. Let's move back to the Declaration in New York in 2016. The New York Declaration in 2016 set in motion a series of similar meetings called Intergovernmental Consultations and Negotiations, wherein this global compact was to be pushed into action by all 193 UN member states. In less than 2 years, the Global Compact was adopted into action by the UN at an international conference held in Marrakesh, Morocco, and gained formal acceptance and endorsement by the UN at large via General Assembly at the end of the next year, December 2019. That's just 9 months ago. This Global Compact is the first ever intergovernmental agreement prepared under the UN. Now, I want you to let that sink in. I want you to fully understand what I just read. For the first time in history, an agreement of action from official government agents who are appointed and not voted in, by the way, all pledged allegiance to a non-sovereign, global, multinational entity that they would guide their member states towards normalized mass migration and Soviet-style communist doctrine of a global superstate. This happened officially 9 months ago. I bet you didn't hear about that on the news, did you? I bet you didn't talk about this over Christmas dinner with your family last year. Did anyone you know even say anything about this? I didn't know about this until I started looking into the Biden plan. It's like what's going on in governments around the world isn't even on the radar of journalists anymore. The media used to be our eyes and ears for those who lead us, but now the media seems to, at best, have gone deaf, blind, and dumb, and at worst, have become a Soviet-style globalism propaganda machine. So what does this official UN plan look like? Let's look through the official resolution. Here, first and foremost, we see the main weapon to be used against us. Human rights of all migrants, social inclusion, cohesion, and all forms of discrimination, including racism, xenophobia, and intolerance. Like I've been saying for years now, the new Church of Woke and this diversity goddess are becoming unquestionable. Disagreements are mocked, derided, and disallowed. Here we see enshrined in the UN resolution of all member states the anti-white, anti-Western, anti-Christian language of racism, xenophobia, and intolerance. These are tools of psychological terrorism specifically crafted and implemented to harm Western kind and force us to willingly prostrate ourselves at the feet of those who seek to steal from us and replace us. They aim to use our good nature and cultured values against us, to disempower and destabilize us, exactly like the Marxists did to Western kind in the early 1900s before there even was a Soviet Union. Also enshrined in this UN decree is a promise for all member states to perpetuate meetings between unelected officials of each country, specifically to facilitate mass migration and globalist policies, focusing on informal meetings to keep each state's representatives up to speed and operating towards the same global goals. Specifically, to curry favor and wealth of donations from multinational corporations and rich global elite to help all member states further the goals of the resolution. If all of this seems like a plan cooked up by a conference room full of Bond villains, that's because it does.
We are now in the unique position to form an international cartel to control not only production, but distribution of these microchips. There is one obstacle.
So what would Bond villain Biden do if he was to win the presidency? The man has priorities, so clearly the first thing he would do is create a special task force to push immigrants into every city and town in America, of course. Gaining top bill on Biden's promises to do if elected is to use the federal government to force governors, mayors, and local community leaders who rely on state funding to create new paths to housing, employment, and education for non-white, non-native people. If you still had any doubt left about the DNC and the Biden plan being abjectly anti-white and anti-American, this should put those doubts to rest. The plan literally says the first thing Joe Biden would use his executive powers for is to force all municipalities in America to implement forced inclusion diversity plans. The exact same kind of plan like Welcome America, which has turned our largest, wealthiest cities into nearly unlivable war zones of crime, human waste, and the greatest wealth disparity in the Western world. On top of that, he would immediately use executive order to repeal any local or state law which sought to halt or impede in any way immigration, including putting into place at the federal level the Fairness for Farm Workers Act, which gives illegal immigrants and international migrant workers the exact same rights to welfare, health care, legal protection, and benefits as native citizens. Continuing, he promises that he would also give these illegal aliens and undocumented workers the right to participate in tax-funded organizations, including voting in local elections. He also pledges to expand the reasons for which asylum seekers can claim asylum here in America and will allow them to easily bypass other countries on their way to America. Additionally, he pledges to double the number of immigration judges, staff, and interpreters to hasten the immigration and naturalization process, immediately end all private sector detention centers, which are used to track down and detain illegal aliens, and to work towards accepting as many of the 70 million displaced refugees and climatory migrants as possible. And how would he do this? By tackling the root cause of migration. Oh yes, here it is. The final lie. The big reveal at the end of the globalist magic show. And what is it? Racism. No, I'm not joking, it's racism. Those of you in the advanced class already knew what all of this would be about in the end, but I'll spell it out for everyone else here in detail. Biden's plan says that the root cause of migration is the unfair treatment, the underlying violence, and the forced instability of foreign lands. Obviously, caused by the evil white man's centuries of colonizing and resource exploiting, so it's clearly our ethical responsibility to make up for this original sin of our forefathers, of our people. We, white Americans, are the cause of mass migration. We have the inescapable, original sin of being the descendants of the people who ate the proverbial apple, and our Mother Mary, our Messiah, is reparations. We must prostrate ourselves at the feet of the diversity goddess and give away our wealth, give away our land, and give away our children's future because there's no other path for redemption. Do you see now? Do you see how the anti-white narrative works? Do you see why I say that white guilt is the Achilles heel of the West? It is white guilt being openly, brazenly used as a weapon against us in a psychological war with the goal of our willing and compliant self-sacrifice for non-white, non-Western people. That is why Biden is far more dangerous than he seems. Sure, he's likely the bumbling, addled old fool he seems to be, but no matter what he seems, he most certainly is ahead of the globalism hydra in America. I hope this deep dive into the Biden plan has shown you how the New World Order is both blatantly obvious and insidious at the same time. I also hope that you can see now what I mean by the anti-white concepts of racism and diversity being weaponized against us through white guilt. This video took me a long time to make, but I hope it was worth it. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and as always, please share my content with others who you think need it or would simply enjoy what I have to say. So, until next time.
The moral to be drawn from this dangerous nightmare situation is a simple one. Don't let it happen. It depends on you.